All right, while we're popping on here, I know this is already starting recording. We welcome everyone to Bridges Live on the Apple Heart and iHeart and Apple Podcasts and all of your podcast channel. And as this starts to link up with all the other channels, YouTube, Facebook, and also Twitter, you can see all that stuff in the recording. Welcome, I'm Dr. Paul. This is Bridges Live, and I have Gerald Moore on. And let me see, because I know people have questions, so I want to make sure I have the questions come up on my tablet here. Let's see if that's going. So other than that, Gerald, tell me how you're doing. Why we get this done? Why we continue to make sure this is all running, all happiness and square. How you been, Gerald?
Oh, Paul, I'm doing great, man. I can't complain. Life is good. The mission, as you know, I'm the founder of Mission Fulfilled 2030, which is a nonprofit organization whose vision is to inspire, educate, and activate 100,000 Black males in technology. So we're doing good work with that. I just launched a pilot where we have 5 boys from different areas of the country involved in an ITF fundamentals certification program that I'm attempting to roll out across the country. So, life is good, always working, talking to folks like yourself every day, trying to improve culture for young Black males in relation to this diversity and inclusion thing that we have going on in this country right now, whether we are actually moving forward towards that initiative or we are just having a lot of hearsay and, just listening to ourselves speak, but being a part of that initiative to try and improve the plight of young Black males through this organization.
Let's do this. And some people are not agreeing with the systematic plight of young Black boys. Do you agree with that?
Definitely. There's definitely several systems that we have in place. We're all aware of the school to prison pipeline.
Right.
We're all aware of mass incarceration in general. We're all aware of the gang violence in our major cities like Chicago and Atlanta and LA. We're all aware of those things. But there's another thing happening in our school systems that is working against us as well, right? So, like, take a young man like myself. I have a degree in electronics engineering technology. I graduated high school with a 1.69 GPA. And people will say, well, how does that happen? How do you become an engineer after graduating high school with a 1.69 GPA? And systemically, those systems that are put in place, one, I never had a Black male educator.
Right. So
we know as Black men, it takes Black men to raise Black boys.
Now, that right there, that's a juggernaut for social civilization to fully understand. Now, I'll tell you what I believe. I believe that the powers that be always knew that.
Absolutely.
And how you knew they knew that is because if you take the movie set that you may have seen of a king and a queen, they had educators to come into their home to teach their children to be kings and queens.
Absolutely.
They may have reached out to other cultures to know what they know, but that was not teaching them. They had them in the house to teach them who they were supposed to be, kings and queens. We've never had that as a Black culture. We've had educators, we've had our people who have advanced, but it was very little. Like even when we had our conversation with mentoring, Black men mentoring, we're just not inundated in those spaces.
Absolutely. And if you look at what we're taught in an education system, right? So if black males only make up 1% of our public education workforce, it's 1%. So it's highly likely, like me, most of us will never have a black male educator. In engineering, had I not gone to an historically black college and university, I would have never had a black male educator. Now, what happens with that, right? So I talk to young kids all the time, and I also launched a tech school for black boys.
Right.
And one of the reasons I did that was I was talking to some kids in a DC public school system, and we were talking about engineering and STEM. And one of the young black boys said to me in middle school, he said, Coach Moore is kind of what they call me. Coach Moore, why is it that if you're smart, you get pulled away from this classroom and thrown in class with the white kids? Why is that? So one, when that happens, there's a couple things that happen with that, and that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
But one, if that kid does not want to be pulled away from his friends, what does he do? He dumbs himself down. He acts out, right?
So he can stay down.
Has nothing to do with his intelligence and his ability. He's intentionally trying to stay with his peer group. So he said again, well, why do we have to be moved away? And I said, well, you know what? That's a problem, and you should not be moved away. But the signal that we're giving is, in order to be smart, we symbolize being smart with being white.
There was a movie that you just triggered with Sean Connery and the black boy who was very smart, but he went to the local public school in New York. And I'm not remembering this movie, but when he ended up having to go because he played good basketball. Remember the movie I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
And he ended up going to that private school, and the teachers could not believe he was this smart. And so he tried to dumb himself down to get back into his school. And his principal was like, I'm not going to let you do that.
Right.
Jamal was the boy's name, but I'm not going to remember the name. What's the name of that movie anyway?
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name of the movie. But I know what you're talking about. And that's kind of like my life, right?
Right.
So I got expelled from middle school in 8th grade for fighting. Fought a lot. Just a product of my environment. If you couldn't fight, then you had to fight. Right?
Yeah.
So I fought so I didn't have to fight. I fought so we're not going to mess with Gerald, because if we step to Gerald, it's on.
Right.
So I fought so I didn't have to fight. So I get expelled from middle school for fighting, and it was at the end of the school year. Because it was at the end of the school year, when it came my freshman year, the expulsion meeting to be kicked out of public schools was happening at the beginning of my freshman year. So it just so happened that because this was one of the first expulsion meetings of the year, the superintendent of schools, I went to school in Rochester, New York, upstate New York. The superintendent of schools happened to be in this meeting. So as the administrators from my school was going through my rap sheet, for lack of a better words, we need to kick this kid out of school because he was suspended how many times, right? So the superintendent was sitting there at the end of the table, and he wasn't saying nothing. And me and my mother at the meeting, the superintendent isn't saying nothing until the administrator from my school was giving, what he thought should happen with me in relation to school.
Mm-hmm.
So as he suggested that I be sent to alternative school, the superintendent stops the meeting and says, hey, did anyone look at Mr. Moore's New York State test record? Whole room gets silent. So he says, well, Mr. Moore is testing at 12th year, 10th month, coming out of 8th grade, and we don't kick kids out of school who are virtually testing out of school in 8th grade. So, Mr. Moore, this meeting is adjourned. You can go to any high school in the city that you want to besides your home school. And I chose to go to a vocational school where I took 4 years of electronics, which was kind of a passion of mine as a kid. But that traditionally doesn't happen for kids, right? You traditionally don't get that opportunity. And even in transferring to that school, I still didn't display the academic acumen that I could have in school, because every teacher that I had took every opportunity to villainize me for asking legitimate questions.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So there's that teaching, don't ask me, we tell you.
Right. So if you know, for us, we as a people, I think with young black males, there's a relationship that has to happen with a teacher in order for us to give our best.
Yes.
And when you have all white educators, that relationship tends to not happen because most of our educators are white women. And I had a conversation a couple summers ago with a white female educator, and the conversation was about, you know, black boys and how black boys mature. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu wrote a series of books called The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys.
Read the book.
Right? And he has this theory called the third grade or fourth grade syndrome, where black boys really excel up to the third or fourth grade. Then there's this dramatic drop off, right? And it makes total sense because it's what happened to me. I was an A student at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was this dramatic drop off. Well, what happens at that stage is black males start to come into their own. We're by nature, we're kind of aggressive and active, and how we relate to each other in the inner city, where one may see as, you know, over aggressive. That's just how we relate to each other. But teachers begin to become afraid of black boys in that third or fourth grade. They're starting to hit puberty.
Right.
They're growing.
Right.
They're starting to look intimidating. Right. So this one teacher, she said to me, you know, she was comfortable, so she was keeping it real. You know, well, they're so cute between kindergarten and second grade. And I was like, kind of like puppies.
Right.
And she was like, yeah. And I was like, all right, now come on. But that's how they view us, right? Kind of like puppies. And then when we get to be the big dog in third or fourth grade, we got some size to us, right? So now they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
We sense that. So how can I give my best for you if I know that you're afraid of me? And now every little minor incident that we may have, you're suggesting I be kicked out of class. You're suggesting that I be put on drugs or medication.
Well, because now they got to tame you.
Exactly. So, but we sense that. We're human. And there's that drop-off. And we also know one bad educator, let alone two bad educators,
or a misdiagnosis of a child,
sets you back for your life.
Yes.
Right? So we got a high percentage of black boys that are very intelligent, that are in systems that are not built for them.
Right.
And they sense it, which sets this whole. And then we have our school to prison pipeline, where they're building prisons based on what Dr. Kunjufu calls the third or fourth grade system.
Yes.
Syndrome. So out of fourth grade, our fourth grade and fifth grade reading levels, they're deciding how many prison beds we're going to need in that next 10 years, and let's invest in that, right? So then there's money being made off
the prison.
You know, the prison and the funneling of black boys down these same roads and pathways. But you know, in what I'm doing with my organization, we're never going to have more black male educators in schools.
No.
One, and on the engineering side, and then let's look at the technical side, right? Which will be our highest paying jobs in the future are going to come in this tech space. Well, we don't have any engineers and computer scientists in our schools. So how are we going to develop engineers and computer scientists, especially black males, and black males make up less than 5% of the high-tech and STEM workforce? How are we going to develop those and create pipelines to create this diversity and equity that we talk about when we don't have any of those individuals in our school, let alone black ones? So if we don't have those individuals in our school, and then even on the school level, to be considered for a computer science or engineering discipline in college to go into that field, you're told early, like I was, well, you're going to have to take pre-calculus or AP chemistry and physics and all of this stuff that none of our black boys even get a chance to take.
One of the things I want to interject real quick is that when it comes to schooling, I did a study, and you know I do a lot of emotional education of the science. Boys, in general, hear tones differently than girls at a young age. So if most of the teachers are women, the tones they pick up does not register unless they're concentrating. Black boys will not concentrate if they don't see anything similar to them. Meaning that if it's a woman, it's young boys. We're talking about young boys. We're talking about elementary kids. Young black boys have a hard time registering to white teachers, female teachers, one, because they don't see themselves. That's why young black girls will be okay in elementary school, because they at least see a woman.
Absolutely.
Right? So there's that disconnect already, but because by only time you see it most often, right? We're not talking, most often you see in elementary school, male, he's either a principal or an authoritarian. So to see that authoritarian person, you're most likely in trouble.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what's interesting is, right, I went to a school, and white teacher invited me to her school to talk about career days, kind of like a career day thing. They wanted to bring some engineers in. So I went into class, and the class was acting out. And teacher was trying to get the kids under control. And I asked the teacher, I was like, I'm sorry, ma'am, but can you leave the room right quick? Mm-hmm. Just go outside the door. I know this is against policy because I'm an outsider. Just do this for me for 1 minute. She left the room. I blew a whistle. Got everybody's attention.
That's Coach Moore coming out of you. That's what I'm...
Right? But the difference was, as long as she was in the room, she was the power.
Right.
Once I came in, blew the whistle, listen up, gave that coach voice, right? And that's... So one of the reasons I call myself Coach Moore is, and teachers, I try and teach this to teachers. I need to do a lot more professional development. But the teacher is equivalent to the snitch, right? Because from the time I'm in kindergarten, who's reporting back to my mother and grandma?
The teacher.
It's the teacher.
The teacher.
Right?
And who are you supposed to tell? The teacher.
Right? So we all know in the hood what happens to snitches, right?
They get stitches.
Right? So the black male associates the teacher with a snitch, but he'll run through a brick wall for his coach.
Yeah.
So I recognized that early just based on the fact of I was a young black male and an athlete, and I know when I go in as Coach Moore, we're on the same team.
Right.
We have the same goal. When I go in as a teacher, even as a black male, I'm kind of caught up in my mind, oh, he's a teacher, he may not be totally on our side.
Right, he's still a snitch.
But as the coach, I can go in there and I coach the lesson. I don't teach the lesson.
Right.
I coach the lesson. Right? Which makes a huge difference. And you're a psychology guy. You understand the psychology of that. And most of our teachers don't.
You know,
our educators don't.
I do teacher development, and I always try to teach. As people say, well, what do you like to teach? I like to teach teachers to be better teachers, whoever you're teaching, and that's because we, on an energetic level, on all other kinds of like a vibration level, but what you think you are transmitting is really what you are inside internally. So if you're not comfortable with X, Y, or Z, doesn't matter what you're showcasing, it's transmitting the opposite to the other. And it's even worse when a child doesn't have a good home life. So they are hungry, so they seek out that comfort from the opposite. And that's why they pick up that internal, you don't really like me.
Right.
You have to be here because you need to be, but you don't really trust me or like me,
Right.
and that
Absolutely.
is repelling.
Absolutely. So when you think about that, right, you think about in the early grades, right, you have these teachers, and when they do work, typically most teachers, they have this reward system.
Right.
Either you get stars, right? We have this chart where you get stars, and we'll do well at that for the first, from kindergarten to maybe second grade. White people think in the terms of objects.
Yes.
We think in more relationship.
Yes.
So by the time the second and third grade comes, that star doesn't excite me anymore. That star doesn't bring me any joy.
No.
Because now I don't have a relationship with you. So I'm not motivated to perform for you for this star. The star has no value. The star has lost its luster. And you may be able to get girls to continue to want to achieve, hey, I got more stars. But boys are not going for that. We're like, young black males are not, we're not, we need to have a relationship with you, especially depending on our home setting, right? So if I'm not having the greatest relationship at home, I'm definitely not going to have a great relationship with the white female educator, right? So and it's just, and then it's just that spiral from there. But what I think we can do, and this is what I'm doing with Mission Fulfilled, is I'm getting professional men in tech, and we're building situations and opportunities for black men to teach black boys outside of the school system.
What type of pushback are you having from non-black people?
So you think of the name Tech School for Black Boys, right? So the name is intimidating.
Yeah.
The name is intimidating. And when I say, well, is it only for black boys? No, I would love for white boys to participate in this program because it brings another perspective to our boys to work together and draw from. But because the name, you're going to shy away. The name, I even had a guy tell me the name is racist. So the name, my book name, Motivate Black Boys.
Right.
Well, that's racist. You know, how to prepare for careers in STEM. That's racist. But then I asked the question, is it not true that every engineering school in the U.S. was built for white men? Every single one.
Every single one. Isn't it true?
So me trying to create a program for black boys, what's wrong with that? Right? We still can't compete on that level. And even in most of the engineering departments and most HBCUs, half the students are white.
Yes.
Because they come get minority scholarships. Like I went to Norfolk, so you have military in Norfolk. So you had a lot of white guys come be in Norfolk State's engineering department.
Yeah, yeah.
So the intimidating factor that what could potentially happen if I reach my goal of educating 100,000 black boys in tech and STEM by 2030, it's intimidating. So where folks are like, oh, like, I think it's a good thing. And then they think about it. And, you know, I'm clearly that I need black men teaching black boys.
Yes.
Not white people coming in to interject.
Yeah. So,
right? So if you want to support, you can support us financially, but we will never have a classroom where you walk in for Mission Fulfilled and you got 5 white people overseeing the black boys in our program. Never going to happen.
You know, just recently, there was this president put out an executive order on stop teaching racial diversity. They are not allowed to teach any diversity training in the federal buildings. You ask them, and they say they agree that there's racial inequality, but they're not allowed to talk about it.
Right.
How are we, you know, it's like one of those things. We want to, it's like, it's literally the executive order says, we want to keep you separated no matter what.
Right. So I just think that, you know, when we look at the speaking, well, we know if you go back in history, right? we excelled in segregation because we had to.
Yeah. Yep.
We had to teach ourselves. We had more doctors. We had more engineers. We had more lawyers. We had more. Even though today we allegedly have more opportunity. But our education systems and the value of education was perceived better. Like when I think about and doing some of the research in the past during segregation, the opportunity for education was almost like going to church on Sunday. You put your best clothes on, you know, you did all of these things to prepare to go get this education, and education was important when it was being delivered by us. Now that the education is not predominantly being delivered by us, there's the value of the education is almost diminished.
Right.
And then even when we look at someone like myself, right? You know, when I went through school and they told me, well, if you do this, you can be successful. But only to a certain level. Don't you try and break through that glass ceiling that's coming ever so quickly.
Let me ask you a quick question. You know, when we as black men talk about the ceiling, so many people have, without recognizing what we see, feel, touch, hear, and know, they actually assume that we are imagining something that we're perpetuating only for ourselves.
Absolutely. So I think about my workplace. So I resigned from my job from this organization I was working with after being a federal government contractor for over 20 years. And when I wrote my book, Motivate Black Boys, no one in my office knew that I was an author. No one knew that I was I was Amazon bestseller. And they worked right next to me. So there was an African woman in my office who had 2 sons, and I brought her a book and I signed the book. And I told her, you know, just keep this on the hush because, you know, I just come here to work. I don't really need the drama here. Like, I just come and get my check because, you know, I've reached my ceiling, and I enjoy going home at the end of the day to my family and doing the projects that I do to help young brothers on the side. So she got excited, like, Gerald, we gotta go out and tell everybody. And I'm like, all right, just keep it on the hush. So she goes and she starts telling everybody on her lunch break. So everybody starts coming back. Gerald, I didn't know you're bestseller. Motivate Black Boys. Well, why motivate black boys? Well, who do I know more than being a black man? That's all I know. That's all I know. I can't tell you how to motivate white boys. I can't tell you that. I can tell you what it took for me
to get
being a D student. So a lot of the white guys got my book just so they could see what was in it.
Right. You know,
some of them were on both sides of the fence, right? Because I talk about at 12 years old, I had my first police encounter. At 14 years old, I get expelled from school. At 15 years old, I did the Scared Straight program in Rochester, New York. At 17, I had my first child. I have full custody of him at 17, right? So when they go through that story, I should be in jail. There were a couple people who were then afraid of me after that point because now they know what my past was, and now I'm no longer this nice guy who they've been working alongside.
Yeah, I'm this other guy.
Exactly. He's this other guy. you know, Gerald, I would have never thought, yeah, but we're not monolithic. And if you knew, everybody would be afraid of me because you guys go home and watch the news every day.
And that's what you see.
And someone with my past is in jail and we're criminalized and we have no compassion and we have no empathy and we're just criminal.
You know, one of the things that we have heard, and I know you have heard it, and I haven't even asked you, is that being around non-black people, someone has so many times has said, "I like you for a black guy."
Oh, absolutely.
And they mean it in such sincerity as a compliment. And I know where they come from. They're not coming from a place of broken heart or prejudice. They actually mean what they say. I like you for a black guy. And I'm like, yeah. And, you know, I've been studying martial arts my whole life. I've been teaching it for a very long time. And people say we don't have these problems in the martial arts community. And here's the reason why. To me, martial arts, and it depends on the athletic program, and actually depends on the martial arts school, breaks down the human being in all levels, and that special coach, right, Coach Moore, talks to them as a human to build them to character, because the game, the sport, the action is minimal compared to being a developed, all-round person.
Absolutely. And what's a big component of that? Self-discipline.
Right.
Self-discipline. So I have the self-discipline enough to use my own mind and make determinations and decisions based on my own thoughts and not just the broader culture.
When you just recently did a book called When All Men Lean In. We all win. Let's talk about that book in your chapter.
First of all, I think it's going to be an awesome book, and you can pick the book up at whenmenleanin.com. But my chapter, I talk about the future of the black family sits on the shoulders of black men. And this is why, right? When we look at the family and the family structure, if we go back in history, what was the first way they decided to destroy the black family? Taking out the black man, right? To the point where in today's society, we'll take ourselves out. But what we have to do is get back to the point of where, and I'm probably complicit in this, right? When we become successful as black men, what do? What's the first thing that we do when we become successful?
Most often is you run away from your race.
And your home.
Yeah.
Right? Our communities.
Yep.
So the vision of success for the black man when he's successful is to leave his community and go perch himself in a white community so he can be accepted.
Right. Assimilate.
So the most successful black men are taking away from black community, and even that's systematic. You know, that's a system in itself. For like, if we say, if I take a smart kid and I send him to Harvard and he gets the best education, is he ever going to bring that education and that knowledge back to the community he came from? It's highly likely no, right? But in order for us to grow as the black family, black men, now we know what the statistics are with black men in prison. We know what the statistics are with, you know, we have this whole LGBTQ issue. So we know what those statistics are. We know that black women are in college at 20-1 over black men. So with all these statistics, people like you and I probably play role of father and dad to multiple children outside of our immediate families. In order for us to get back and restructure the black family, men have to come back to our communities and be a part of our communities. Like a lot of us now, we get successful, and what we tend to do is we go to work, we come home, we deal with our children, maybe, and on Sunday we sit down and watch football. We sit down, I don't care about nothing else, I'm going to watch football. But we have to at some point, come back to our communities. I did this talk 2 years ago, and I posed the question: what would happen if our Division I athletes who play football and basketball, our biggest, fastest, strongest, and I would even go on a limb and say brightest
black
men came back to our communities as whole individuals? What would happen? What would happen is we would have this restructuring of the black family, because say what you want, you can call a football player a dumb jock if you want, but he has to study a playbook and know that playbook that's this thick.
That's right.
He's forced into discipline because he's on the team. Get up and lift at this time. Be at this. Do this. So football taught me structure and discipline. The problem is most of our biggest, fastest, strongest, brightest, when they go to these Division I universities, they're primarily white institutions.
Yeah.
And they're only nurturing their physical being. They're only nurturing that physical gift. Right? So they're not nurturing that mental gift and giving them the belief that even though we know only 1% of us are going pro, and the rest of us need to become professionals.
Correct.
Right?
One of the things that we want to talk about in the development of our society is that we often seem as black men, we have to continue to explain what, who, where, and why without just doing. It seems like no other race ever has to explain who, what, and why, and what they're doing. So as black men, we do take on so much of a role, and we do leave our systematic families broken. And in that brokenness, we don't ever remember why we left broken, because we're so internally traumatized. And until we fix that trauma, or just say, I need help. Thanks, Coach Moore. I don't get it, but can you help me? And allow that help to nurture them, because that's when we have maturation.
I agree with you on so many levels. I think over the last couple of years, there's always been a stigma of seeking mental health treatment in the black community. There's always been that stigma. I think that we're having a resurgence in us being able to seek treatment for depression or, these minor mental health things that if we don't take care of become major mental health things. Mm-hmm. But I have to look at my life, right? By the time I was 18, I knew 15 to 20 young black men that were murdered that I grew up playing football with, grew up around the corner from me, that I had personal relationships with. That's abnormal. If a person knows one person that has been murdered, it's traumatizing.
But wait a minute. You know what's funny? It's abnormal for non-blacks.
Right.
Because if we go get our hair cut together in a black barbershop, you know it and I know it. Everyone's going to be like, yeah, me too. Me too. And my cousin, my uncle, and all of it.
So what does that do to you as a young man? What type of post-traumatic stress are you carrying
all the way
that
through
whole time?
Yeah.
Right? So my uncles, my father was in the middle of 12 children. My mother was the oldest of 9 children. My mother had 6 brothers. My father had 7 brothers. 100% of my uncles and my father at some time in their life struggle with alcohol or drug addiction. based on that fact, my chance of success was pretty much
shot.
Would be slim to none.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that most of us are going to tend to be how we were raised and what we saw in our communities. Mm-hmm. So, looking at that, and I don't know how I escaped that. I've never drank or never do anything like that. But when I think about that trauma that I watched happen, because my mother was the oldest of 9, when her brothers were in stress or having family issues or being dragged to the drug clinic, that came through my home. That came through my home because my mother was the oldest. My grandmother had passed away. My mother was the matriarch of her family. So as I watched all of this happen, and then my father's parents died when he was like 11. They were killed in an accident or something like that. So my father and his siblings basically raised themselves. And my father's from Georgia, and my mother's from South Carolina, and they met in upstate New York, because they went north looking for work. Mm-hmm. But when I look back at my family and all of the pain that I saw my uncles go through that led to them being alcoholics and chemical, addicted to drugs, and I think about all of that and what I've come through, like, it's amazing that I'm here.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Excuse me?
I'm glad you're here. And we don't get told this enough, but I'm proud of you, brother.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. But when we look at our young black males today and think about everything that we have to go through just to kind of be level, right? Just to kind of be level. If you grow up in the inner city of Chicago and you live in a war zone and, you don't see a way out. You don't see a way out. So if I'm hungry and I'm struggling and my mother may be on drugs or my father may be on drugs, and the only thing you can tell me to get out is to go to school and get A's, but I may not have food at home, that doesn't work. Like the equation doesn't add up. So the only thing that I can do, I'm in survival mode from the time I'm 7 and 8 years old.
Yes. And and when your brain is in survival mode, and this happens because the media wants you in survival mode. And here's why I've said this before, and we'll let you go because I know you're a busy man. Here's why the system wants you to stay in survival mode. Because you will not incorporate the frontal lobe, which is your reasoning, developing, and cultivating of the part of the brain. It keeps you in the oldest part of the brain of the animalistic to keep you animalized. Right. So until you become frontal lobe thinkers and use those hemispheres, and they keep you in survival mode by showing the things on TV, what they show, creating the things that they create, they're going to keep you animalistic. And the lower level you are, because that's how they're programming you, they got you. And the only way to break out of that is for you to get help, for you to ask and say, Coach Moore, help me.
And where we are now, like with technology, right? Most of our young people, we don't spend any time in our own thought. We just swiping all day. We never take the time. What are we thinking? What are our thoughts? Right? So we spend our whole day in the thoughts of other people, and those thoughts are not real. Mm-hmm. Right? Those events are not real. So we're spending our time in this fake world, and it's really becoming, for us, black people consume the most media in this country, right? And on a consumer basis, not a developer basis.
On a consumer
basis. So we're consuming things that are set up to program us, and we're not developing those things to actually create change. Someone asked me one time, somebody posted something negative and they asked me to comment on it. And I said, it doesn't behoove me to comment on stuff that's negative, right? Because who is it helping? It's not going to help me.
No.
Like, I'm not giving energy
to
I'm
that.
not giving any energy to anything that's negative.
Right. Brother.
Right? Even if it's in front of me. I don't have to comment on it. Right? I tell people all the time, and I coach my children, something that's negative in nature, you can view it. You don't have to comment on it. You're not being forced to comment on it. Even if someone asks you, you're not being forced to participate in negativity. And I think we go down that trap. And a lot of our shows that are being created, that are so-called good shows for black people in this reality TV space, is negative in nature. So we spend all of our time taking in all of this negative energy to the point where we can't celebrate something good. So like for Mission Fulfilled, as a nonprofit, and sometimes I don't even get angry at this, because I think that, you know, there's an education that I have to do with Mission Fulfilled to get people to support how they should. My white friends donate double to maybe triple what black people donate to support black boys, with no questions asked. I know Gerald. I know he's going to do a good job. Gerald, what are you doing? Oh, write the check. Black people will give me hearts and likes all day.
No money.
But they won't support. Gerald, it's awesome what you're doing with those kids. I see you out there. I see, man, dude, that kid that was rapping his computer science homework. Oh, man, that was dope. I wish my kid could do that. Gerald, how many free programs you going to have? Well, how many free programs can I actually do to support this mission? Right? There is a cost. I actually think that we believe that we're supposed to be on scholarship for everything, even if it's ours.
And
even if it's something that's black, it's supposed to be subsidized
for them.
Yeah. Like for the life of me. But, dude, I don't get deterred. I get out here and every day I go at it, you know, because we'll come around. Like, we'll come around. Like, I'm just a vessel at this point, and we'll come around, and I'll pass the torch to somebody else, one of these young brothers that I'm coaching up, and he'll take the torch and he'll run with it. But man, I'm enthusiastic. I'm enthusiastic about what I do, and I can't think about those people who will down what I do. Never give it any thought.
No,
Never give it any thought.
And we've talked about this before. It's like black people devalue themselves, so they want to devalue everything else. And that comes from that slave mentality. They're so traumatized. You know, once you believe that you don't deserve something that is that needs to cost, and you need something affordable, you devaluing yourself.
Exactly. And then what do we think of free? Right? Oh, if it's free, it must not be good. That's why we can run out and we can pay $300 for the Jordans, but I won't put my kid in a computer science class for that.
Or I won't put him in a martial arts school with this. Or I won't see him. I won't give him to Dr. Dyer so he can help you with this. But I want him to have fresh and dripping jeans. Whatever the hell that means. I'm so old, I don't know.
Right. I'm a go out and get me a Dooney and Burke bag as a woman, and I ain't even got $20 to put in it.
You know, Dr. George Fraser said that if we don't change really in a hurry what we're doing, we're going to be in our second slavery.
Oh, absolutely.
By 2038.
So I actually touch on that in my chapter, and when men lean in, we all win.
We all win.
Because if you look at where we are, they're predicting that the average family wealth of the black family will be zero by 2050.
Right.
We are probably already there. There was a woman. She was an accountant. She was a mathematician, and she was doing some work, and she said the reason that police can treat us the way they do, and how black folks are treated, because the wealth of a slave when they were released was like $1, and she was like, the average wealth of a black person is the same as it was then.
Right.
So why treat us any differently?
Yeah, why?
She said, why treat us any differently?
Matter of fact, the wealth gap is greater now than it was in 68.
Exactly.
Okay, so we had more educated black men coming out of Reconstruction than we do now.
Absolutely.
So, brother, I love you, and I'm proud of you, and we keep pushing on, and we need all people to push in and lean in. Otherwise, this is going to burn, and everyone's going to be a little bloodier and nastier, and that's not healthy for anyone.
Yeah, but we got to look forward to Mission Fulfilled.
Yes.
MissionFulfilled2030.org. If anybody out there, y'all care to support black boys as we create programs in tech to bridge the digital divide and try and put a dent in the income to wealth gap. I got a plan. If I got a young black male in my program, because our 8-year-olds today, in 10 years, is our next workforce.
Yes.
So if I get an 8-year-old in my program and I get him through the program and he's technically savvy, 5 years post his high school or college, I see them online and I will have them online to earn $100,000. If we can get 100,000 black men earning $100,000, that will bring 1 billion yearly of economic impact into our communities, with a 10 billion economic increase over 10 years.
Right.
That's how we got to look at it, as economics. There's an economic play that need to be played.
Absolutely.
And that's the game we're playing with Mission Fulfilled.
How do they get a hold of you for Mission Fulfilled?
Just go to missionfulfilled2030.org. There's a contact there, or you can contact me at Gerald at missionfulfilled2030.org.
Thank you, brother. And I'll be in touch, and you be safe, and we will stay up and stay proud.
All right, Dr. Dyer, appreciate you. Keep doing good work.
God bless.
Take care.